Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Gallowgateshots YouTube channel on this fine Friday night. As we're always joined by Shell when it's down to the legalities, the lawyer-based arbitration, as she loves it so much. Shell makes a return to the YouTube channel. Hi, Shell.
Hello, happy Friday.
I can't believe we're actually doing this on a Friday night. And even more baffling that there's almost 100 people doing this on a Friday night. It just shows that there's absolutely nothing else to do.
Well, no, it's obviously just because we are quality entertainment.
Quality, are we?
We only just had like 3 messages saying we're late. Like, do these people not watch this? This is early.
Yeah, this isn't late for the Gallowgateshots YouTube channel, especially for a live one. This is early. You should have probably been waiting for around about 10-15 minutes. But because we don't have the likes of Decker and Bestie, we're almost on time. Shell, I'm going to start off and we're just going to have a chat between me and you without going into all of the likes of the legalities, which is said, and just have a catch up with yourself because, as always, as Newcastle United fans, we haven't had much joy at the minute. But what's your recent thoughts on the last 24, 48 hours at the football club where our manager is fighting with team?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a surprise, is it? But it does seem to be getting more and more ridiculous every single day. I don't know where it's going to stop. I mean, the press conference was actually just going to be quite interesting today, but in a really depressing way. Like, I don't want to be looking forward to how ridiculous it's going to be every week.
Yeah, I think that's been the most excitement that we've had this week as Newcastle fans is the build-up to the likes of the press conference. Obviously, you had Craig Hope breaking the news that Matt Ritchie called Bruce a coward. Bruce stormed out his office to confront Ritchie, shoulder barged him randomly. I don't know how that comes about, how he just randomly shoulder barged somebody. But yeah, had to be separated. But it just shows you how much of a circus it is at the moment at our football club. And that's even before we get on talking to the things that we're going to cover tonight as best as we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because while you don't want it to be happening to your club, at the same time, I think most of us are like, at least someone's actually standing up to, got some balls in the dressing room to say, like, what is going on?
Yeah, this is what we needed for a little while, though. This is what we needed for a little while. Obviously, everything which happened at the weekend in regards to that substitution, I don't want to focus too much on that because we've done it God knows how many times in the last week. But it's obviously you saw Lascelles being completely confused about the situation when he was interviewed after the game. Then obviously that stemmed over on to Steve Bruce blaming Matt Ritchie. He blamed Dubravka for the goal. He had already annoyed called Darlow for not telling him that he was going to get dropped. Steve Bruce has managed to piss off about 5 players in the space of 3 days. Great man of management. So don't believe what John Joe Shelby says, where he comes out and says he's the best man manager he's ever worked for. Clearly not true.
Yeah, and the club are so good at the top level, keeping everything a secret. It makes you wonder, like, how on the training pitch it's just leaking all over the place. So it just needs to get a bit more organised. But maybe it's just a reflection. He's lost the dressing room, so Richie thinks I don't really care what comes out in the press. But
who do you think the mole is? Who do you think the mole is? So Steve Bruce thinks there's a mole inside the ground because the report which Craig Hope put out was word for word. Who's the mole? It's Graham Jones, isn't it?
I mean, that would just be so fucking ironic, wouldn't it? Maybe it is. The thing is, like, we all know that it's been happening for ages anyway. It's not a big surprise that it's leaking. It's just the way that it's being handled. And Steve Bruce thinks the answer is just not let the journalists ask any questions. That's
interrupt them before they get a chance to finish. Steve Bruce's way. Right, let's get down to business. In fact, before we do so, people who are watching, you can see that Shell is repping the Always Smiling Faces podcast t-shirt. The other side, you fell for it every single time somebody falls for the wrong side.
I'm just going to lift up both and then you
So you can actually buy those t-shirts, and we will put a link in the description when we finish recording. So if you do want to grab one of them to support the YouTube channel, feel free to buy one. So tonight, as we said, it's Friday night. We're going to get down to some serious stuff now. Some serious stuff which, I'll be honest, probably like the majority of people who are in here tonight don't have a clue what any of it means. Hence why you're here. The intelligent one of the Gallowgateshots YouTube channel. So you've got the good-looking one and the intelligent one tonight.
Yeah.
Are you laughing for?
Fine by me. Well, last time I accidentally called you fat, and we've never really moved.
Did you?
So yeah. Well, I just said everyone was getting a bit lockdown chubby, but these t-shirts are come up pretty big, so making me feel loads better.
Did you say I was fat? Bro, I
didn't.
Mint, cheers. Right, so club statement. The club released a statement earlier this afternoon. Dumb it down.
I haven't even looked at the club statement. What did they say? I just looked at the facts.
Well, in fact, forget the club statement, because like you said, obviously you've got the facts in there. And do you want to show everybody what you've got in front of you?
This is the actual judgment. This is what I read. There's been a few dramas before where I've said, I'm not sure I agree with that journalist's take on something. So I thought, you know what, I'll just read the facts and then see.
I think what we need to do, I think we need to cover a little bit, yeah, because a lot of people can obviously look at the club statement, look at journalists and reporters' tweets on the likes of Twitter and social media. And let's be honest, there's only a handful of characters in there. Shell's actually gone to the effort here of printing. How many pages is that?
It's about 40, I think.
So there's 40 pages there. Shell's got the effort to print in 40 pages, and she's worked her way through these today.
I really enjoyed it. That is a real reflection on my life right now.
Have you actually enjoyed it?
Yeah, I really have.
Oh, wow.
They have. There's a particular part where there's obviously they've cut out the emails that the Silk, the chairman, has been sending to his own solicitors, and they read like text messages to your ex after like 6 or 7 glasses of wine. There's so many typos. Like, it's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Right. So take her right back to the start of that. What's made you print that off? What's happened today to make you look at this?
So obviously we've known for a little while there's arbitration's been ongoing, and I've highlighted some of the dates. So as I said before, it's not a quick process, and all of this has been going on since September. When you have arbitration proceedings, the way that it normally works, and again, it depends on who governs the arbitration. There's lots of different bodies that you can do it through. But in this case, what's happened is NUFC get to pick their own arbitrator, the Premier League get to pick their arbitrator, and then they have a chair. So there's a panel of 3, and they've picked this guy, Michael Beloff QC, as between them, they've chosen that he should be the chairman. And
so he's basically the referee here.
Yeah, so he obviously he listens to both sides, but he's got basically the casting vote. And NUFC have looked at his record and looked at him briefly and said, yeah, that's absolutely fine. And then the trouble has obviously started at some point further down the line when the Premier League has made some disclosures about the cases that he's been involved in the past, the amount of times he's represented the Premier League, the amount of times that he's been appointed by Bird & Bird, who are the Premier League solicitors, and Newcastle United have said, well, hang on a minute, I'm not sure that's absolutely okay with us. And then they've invited him to stand down. So they've sent him an email and said, considering all of these points, do you feel like you might want to step back? And he's responded saying, no, I don't. So Newcastle United said, we'll see in court then, mate. And that's what's happened. And the judge has made a decision on whether he should be removed or not today, which, as you probably all know, the judge said that he didn't need to be removed.
Yeah. So on that, the judge has said that he isn't going to get removed, despite Newcastle's best efforts. Is there any reasoning behind that? How they came out and said that they believe this, and this, or is it just a case of no, he's staying put?
There's lots of legal tests, so there has to be a realistic prospect of bias, and there's lots of reasons and case law as to what they might say is or isn't. So NUFC said, well, the reasons that we think is biased is because he's given the Premier League advice on what we say is exactly the same issue. The Premier League says slightly different. We say that he's been involved in too many of these cases with Bird & Bird. We say these dodgy emails that he's been sending to Bird & Bird, his own instructing solicitors, saying, do you want me to come off the record? They make us think that he obviously is worried that he might not be able to be impartial, which is why he's asking us what we should do. So the judge looks at all of those arguments. and says, okay, I'm going to look at Newcastle United's arguments separately, and then I'm going to look at them cumulative. So even if they were right on every point, would that still get me to the point where I don't think that this silk could arbitrate on these facts and these concerns and be fair and reasonable? And he goes into like lots of detail in the judgment as to why he thinks that he can be. And then he says, on that basis, I think it's a pretty big call for us to say that this silk would definitely not be able to be fair and reasonable when arbitrating on these specific facts. And I think you probably know better than I do, but it's a bit in the beginning of the judgment what the Premier League actually said. So it's to do with whether KSA would be a director. And there's a bit of a niche legal point about that. So it's really complicated, but basically NUFC are saying this is a two-stage process. This silk gave advice on that specific section of law, which relates to the step after that as to whether they would be disqualified or not. And so it is relevant. And the Premier League say, no, we didn't get to that stage as to whether KSA would be controlling all directors. We didn't get that far. We were saying, if they were, these are the considerations, which is really, really like a very specific, nuanced point. And I can see NUFC's legal argument that says, if you're going to think about the first thing, you'd have to think about the second. And essentially, the judge said, look, that's not all here for me today, but as far as I'm concerned, the silk has not given advice on that point, which would make him biased against Newcastle in arbitration. So it's really long and dry, but
in your obviously professional opinion on this one though, did Newcastle obviously? Let's just get your opinion. Do you feel as if Newcastle had a point here?
So from my perspective, I look at it strategically, and I think, and there's someone has tweeted me about this already, and I had a conversation with another lawyer who said that he was going to be watching tonight, actually, because that's the kind of exciting people we are. We had a conversation about the whole Jose Mourinho effect, where he calls out referees at the beginning and says, I know in the past that you've made terrible decisions. Part of me thinks that, like, potentially Nick DeMarco has looked at this and thought there is no way that we're going to win this, because he knows, right? He's the expert. He doesn't lose cases. He knows exactly how these things work. He knows exactly all of the people in this case. He works with them. He's very closely linked. And he thought, do you know what? I'm not going to win, but let's just make a big song and dance and beat the drum about how there's a potential bias here. And even if we lose, everybody, particularly this silk, is going to be thinking when we do get to arbitration, wow, I need to handle this really, really carefully and make sure that I am fair to Newcastle. So I think that's why it's come about. And in that sense, I don't see it as the journalists do, which is we've gone to court on 2 points and lost already.
So do you think it's a great point which you've just said there, and you mentioned Jose Mourinho there, and obviously Alex Ferguson was great at the mind games. Do you think it's a little bit of mind games in here where we'll just rough you up a little bit before this even starts?
I think it might be. And again, obviously, you'll note from my thread, I've had to caveat it heavily because people will probably be calling up my employers who obviously don't spend their weekends looking at these kind of documents. My personal opinion is, and thinking of the aggressive way that Mike Ashley approaches confrontation and litigation, he's thinking, yeah, don't think that you're going to get away with a single thing on this. We're watching you every single step of the way, and everyone else is watching you. We want to have it in public, and if we don't win that, then the fans are going to see that we want it in public, and we want to argue on every single point because we already feel like the whole Premier League process was so intransparent that everybody wants some answers. And he's saying, well, do you know what? You've got a fight on your hands now. I think that's at least a very big part of this decision and bringing these points to the court.
So you mentioned Mike Ashley's aggressive stance, and if people really do want to go back, and if you look at the videos which we put out, which you done for us this time last year, probably throughout, this was the same approach which you mentioned that Mike Ashley is aggressive from previous and from history when he has had to go to court proceedings and things like that. This is what he does in every aspect of business, not just legal proceedings, but in every aspect of business. This is Mike Ashley. This is he appoints people to take this forward foot and this aggressive stance.
Yeah, absolutely, it's aggressive. And if anyone is really, really bored enough to have a look at the judgment, you'll see on the last page of the judgment, Nick DeMarco has written to the judge and said, that's great, thanks very much, but I still don't think it's good enough. So just to let you know, these are still my points, which is quite unusual. And it's also quite unusual for a judge to address if counsel's spoken to them after the event and to reiterate their decision. Judges are usually, well, in my experience, probably because they don't care about my arguments, they're like, I've made my decision, leave my courtroom. So I think it is indicative of the fact that he's instructed counsel, he's instructed 2 silks, which is more senior than the Premier League's team. He's saying, we're going to fight this every single step of the way. And I think some of him is thinking, I don't know if I'm going to win. He doesn't necessarily maybe even think he's going to win, but someone's getting held to account because, I want rid of this bloody club that I'm stuck with,
Yeah. I want to go a little bit back because there may be people watching this, and we've mentioned his name already there, Nick DeMarco. Obviously, we have covered this in the past on previous videos, so I don't want to focus too much on it. Can you just give a brief description of who Nick DeMarco is and what his job role task is right now?
So he acts on instructions from his solicitors, who are Denton's, again, quite an aggressive law firm, generally quite aggressive litigators, and they act on instructions from Mike Ashley, from Mike Ashley's legal team. So everything that he's saying, although he's obviously coming up with the legal arguments, that's what his client's instructing him to do, to take those points to court. The barrister is the mouthpiece. They're all independent, so they're all attached to chambers. So that means one day he might be acting for, this client, another day he'll be acting for someone completely different. And it's all quite closely linked. So I said in my thread, which you said you haven't looked at, but that's cool. Basically, it's all quite a unique incestual world. So sports law, there are only, if you're the best in the game, there can only be sort of 10 or 15 people in the game, right? So he's at the top of that chain. I'm sure that people watching this will have looked at his LinkedIn or looked at his Twitter page. He's acted for loads of Premier League clubs. And this is essentially his bag. He's the expert.
So he's known as the Messi of this. That's the tagline that gets put beside him for some reason.
Yeah, I find the Chambers and Partners references, which is where all your best mates write in about you. I find them a little bit vommy. He's obviously very vommy. His record speaks for itself. Obviously, he's very, very good, very good. And from the beginning of when he was instructed, I was like, this is heavyweight. This is really great. He's obviously a silk, so that means roughly about 20 years call or more, and has been through a special process to be considered one of the best barristers in the country.
So the little vommy taglines that come along with it, he looks like it was it the one who's just been approved that has been known as the Godfather, not the Messi, the Godfather. Was that him?
Yeah, I mean, again, all with a pinch of salt. If you're in this industry, these Chambers and Partners reviews all come. I sometimes just, you get messages from people you've worked with, but also people that you're mates because they, it's like a review basically. They're going to say good things. But they're all obviously very, very talented in their specialised field, and he will have worked with, I would imagine, I haven't done the research, all of the people in this case as well before. I think someone messaged me earlier actually saying the Premier League solicitors are also from Blackstone's Chambers, which doesn't surprise me. I can see from the outside that just looks really, really incestual. When I was basically doing barrister's work as an advocate, some of my friends would prosecute me one day and then we'd be working together the next day. So it does sound all a bit incestual, but that's just the nature of freelance work, and whatever case comes in, you take it and you have a professional boundary. And that's another thing the judge said in his ruling. He was saying it's pretty big for you to say that this silk, who has been independently arbitrating on various things for the last 40 years, is going to somehow think, I'm going to absolutely stitch up Newcastle United here inside with the Premier League, putting his whole career at risk. Not to mention that whatever decision he comes to, he'll have to provide an actual legal basis. So in that sense, that's one of the things that they take into account. But I can see from a lot of the messages that I get, people are like, how on earth, if you work with someone or you've previously represented someone, could you possibly do it again? And that's the reason why. It's a very small field.
It's common that it happens. I think that there's been a lot of tweets going around this afternoon saying, "Oh, like they're going head to head against each other," blah 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 blah. But like you just said, it's probably happened in the past before. We know that they've worked alongside each other in cases, and now they're going against it. It may not be the first time it's happened.
Yeah, and they're professionals, so they don't take it personally. They all have a drink in the bar at the end of the night. That's what happens on big cases. He will have so with Michael Beloff, it's got such an unusual name and I still can't remember it. He will have certainly have been led by him. So when Beloff was a silk and he was a junior, then he would have certainly been what's called led in cases by him. So they would have worked together in that sense. But it doesn't mean, you can't represent Billy next week because you represented Tony last week and you both did the case together, or someone can't prosecute. It just wouldn't be able to work like that at the bar.
This is all before arbitration has even happened. Even started. There's a lot of people mention arbitration there. There's somebody, I'll see if I can find the comment there, Shell, just so I can show it on screen there. Before we get in the minefield of everything. He said that, can you explain how arbitration works when we get to it? It's something which we have covered in the past, but dumb it down for all of us.
It's supposed to be a private process, whether, again, that there'll be a legal argument about whether those proceedings should be made public. But at the moment, all of the negotiations are happening in private. And when there is a disagreement between the parties that they can't resolve, that goes to the arbitrator. So sometimes there are little things that crop up along the way. There may be more things like disclosure, for example, if Nick DeMarco and NUFC are asking to look at some documents that the Premier League don't think are relevant or they shouldn't disclose, then that will go to the arbitrator. So the whole point of arbitration is it's kind of like mediation, if anyone's ever done that. So it's trying to reach a point without actually being in open court. It's slightly cheaper, it's slightly quicker. So you are expected to resolve as many issues as you can internally, and then it goes to the panel to make a decision thereafter, and whatever the panel decide will be final. And looking at this judgment, it's very hard to say what the actual grounds are, but it seems to me that Newcastle United is taking issue with Premier League's decision letter, which is stupidly called because they say they didn't make a decision, which is that their starting presumption is that KSA would be a director, and therefore in that takeover scenario with PIF would have control, and therefore there would need to be some reassurance to the Premier League from PIF or their associated parties as to why they are separate from each other, basically. So that will be the subject, I would suspect, of arbitration. Again, we don't know what they're seeking to achieve. It might be compensation, it might be to prove that the owners and directors test was incorrectly applied, various things. But I've also seen there's quite a lot of journalists saying today, personally I find as a lawyer Ben Jacobs speaks a lot of sense, and he said today, the position is literally that PIF aren't going to get involved either way until they know if we're going to be in the Premier League or if we're going to be in the Championship. And that makes sense because the Premier League has completely different owners and directors test to the one in the Championship. So if you argue they've applied the Premier League test incorrectly and then you're not in the Premier League, then it's all absolute chaos. So I can't see why PIF, especially with how precariously balanced it all is now, why they wouldn't just wait and see if we stay up. That doesn't mean that arbitration is going to be delayed, particularly if, for example, Mike Ashley wants compensation. He can still get that court decision. But I think the point is that PIF are obviously like, we're going to call our jets on this Premier League club until we know if they are or not.
Yeah, you mentioned Ben Jacobs here, and I just want to go back a little bit. And obviously, Ben was Newcastle enemy at one point, and I never really got that because Ben's been on this channel and this podcast before, and Ben's always came across really well. And what he normally comes out and says, especially when I know he's got issue with that podcast, but with ourselves, it's always been correct. And if you go 12 months back, it'll probably be really close to 12 months now. I'd done the first podcast with Ben Jacobs, and not long after you started obviously giving your verdict on the likes of the owners and directors test, court proceedings, blah 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 blah. What was happening with the Premier League? It came full circle. We as a channel, we didn't sit on the fence, but we give advice, things in a professional manner, and we didn't claim to be involved in any way whatsoever. And it came full circle where people are starting to understand that it wasn't as simple as what it was made out to be. And And that's all that we said from the start.
Yeah, obviously, I thought it would go ahead. I've never claimed to be in the know. From everything, the problem with the process is it wasn't transparent. So we were told that there were no issues, and obviously it has become more complicated. And as a result of that, and the fact that everything's going on behind closed doors, that's the reason that when this all started up again, I was like, we should urge some caution, because even as you can see from these documents, these discussions are going on behind the scenes, which is what they should be doing. But they've been going on since September last year, and now we're only just getting to like the minor peripheral issues before we even get to arbitration. So that's why it takes months and months, and that's why some of this should be going on behind the scenes, because when everything does get played out in public, it just makes it slightly more difficult, and it does slow things down. But I think everybody's just so desperate for good news that sometimes there's a small minority of fans who choose not to believe Ben Jacobs, because I think he worked for beIN
Sports at one point.
Yeah, sometimes people have said to me, like, oh, I don't believe what you're saying, because if you're not completely pro takeover, then you're not even a fan. I know obviously Luke Edwards, I get grief about Luke Edwards being on the same podcast as me 6 months ago. So I can see how, people do just get, because he made a jump to some conclusions about some sort of dodgy other potential buyer. Now everything that he says is not credible. Like, I think people just need to take things with a pinch of salt. But I think that's why today I wanted to tell you what I think about this, and I haven't looked at anything other than the basic headlines from other journalists. Maybe just because they don't take it very well either.
Yeah. So that's page 1 finished. What about page 2?
That's it. That's all that I can't go to the really complicated section F, on which I can't do. But I don't think, I know there's a lot of people just looking at it saying, well, the judge has really screwed us over here. It's absolute bollocks. Like, on the face of it, I can see why people think that, but he's also come to some really reasoned decisions.
So this Beloff fella at the moment, he's not Newcastle United fan enemy at the moment. A lot of people have seemed to start targeting him, but he's just the man in the middle at this moment in time. Is that correct?
He's going to be the chairman. He's going to decide on the main aspects of arbitration, unless something happens meanwhile, which gives us another good reason why he won't. But I don't think us firing abuse at him is going to help. But also, just generally, let's just not fire personal abuse at people. He's just doing his job. There is a section in this report about whether he should be anonymised, and
which means what?
As in whether they should just not name the arbitrator party in the case, because it's not safe to do so. And I suspect that this judge who's on a judge pelling doesn't realise how closely a lot of Newcastle fans will scrutinise this. But let's not message him. Let's just leave him be. Let's leave it to the lawyers to deal with that. But he's not an enemy. He's just someone that's going to make an independent decision. And he is going to just base it on the facts. That's the problem. But obviously, if that goes in the Premier League's favour, then people will be unhappy.
Yeah. Obviously, like what we said at the start, basically, in a nutshell, he's here to referee. He's here to make the verdict in the end, and he's got to hear the evidence put towards him from both parties, and he's the man to make the decision at the end of that. We've got to remember here, it's legal proceedings. It's not just a case where they're just going to go, oh yeah, we'll just go with the Premier League and what they say. This is a legal battle between two parties here. He can't just sit on one side of the fence. He's got to literally sit here and listen to every single bit of evidence, then make his professional opinion on the back of that. It's not a case where right now he's just going to be thinking what I've seen on social media today is, oh, you'll just fail the Premier League. That's not the case. He's gone against the Premier League in the past. We've seen it alongside Nick DeMarco. He has gone up against the Premier League, so it's not necessarily where he's going to work in their favour. He's an independent mean in this one.
Yeah, of course. And, obviously in my job, I mainly defend. I very rarely prosecute. But having prosecuted, people say, well, it's over. Like, I'd never trust you to defend someone if you prosecuted. But that's how you become a better defence lawyer, because you know exactly what the other side are going to do and how it works and what to say. So he's in a good position to decide. And I think we have to be very careful saying, like, cherry picking and saying, well, this is not independent, when all of the lawyers are from the same chambers. Like, you know, we probably, our client, Nick DeMarco has probably worked more with this chairman than anyone on the other side. So, you know, it's just too small a world to say, well, if they've worked with this before, their job is to interpret the law. And there's obviously a very fine line between what they decide. But it might work in our favour. He might be thinking, my good old pal Nick that bakes me bread every now and again.
Don't get started about the bread, man. Don't get started about the bread. Sam says, hey Israel, lovely listening to you. Is arbitration usually weeks or months, or is it a case of how long it takes?
So it's usually months. It's usually shorter than court proceedings. But as you can see with things like this is a 40-page judgment on two very, very small issues. So it can just spiral out of control. And that's why when there was a discussion about other arbitration proceedings, I was saying they just need to hang on, because things like this crop up all the time. And it's very, very difficult to say, looking at this, like, how do I know if, you know, there's going to be another late disclosure from one side, which, I don't know, either Bird or even Nick DeMarco is going to want to go to court over again. You just don't know. But the purpose of arbitration is because it is quicker than going to the High Court for the whole thing.
And like you said from the start, that this isn't a matter of days or weeks. This could take, like you just said, months. It could do it. It takes us, like Sam said, how long is a piece of string? It takes as long as it takes.
We don't know, like, what the parties' intentions are. So obviously we know the Premier League have generally been quite slow, and our opinion is they've dragged their feet. But now with the whole relegation thing, it might be that Nick DeMarco's instructions are to drag it out for longer. And obviously, tactically, there are certain things that you can do to delay it. So I don't want to come on this podcast and say it's going to be over in this amount of time, because I will be absolutely jumped on and lose all my credibility if that doesn't happen. So it's very difficult to say. I would say at the moment, I think our WhatsApp group is of the opinion that the takeover is probably dead, and we kind of just should focus on, you know, the football. I don't even, should we?
I'm glad somebody is.
I just think, you know, there's no point. You know, I know some people find, you know, think that getting rid of Mike Ashley is absolutely key to us moving forward, and I absolutely agree with that. But I don't think we should be relying on these court proceedings, because, you know, we've been burnt already.
Yeah. We've been going for 32 minutes there, so I'm just going to fire through some questions. So if anybody does want to throw some questions in,
I'll try and answer them as quickly as I can.
Yeah. So one of them from John Gandhi here says, do you think we'll appeal the initial decision, especially keeping proceedings private?
No, because we've already got the full transcript. We already know what's happened. There hasn't been any statement from the club. I haven't read it, but it doesn't sound like they're going to appeal it. And I don't think that they would get anywhere anyway. It's a really, really minor point. I think what we're doing is saying, just putting it out there, and if the chairman does decide against us, then having already made a big song and dance about this, we'll be coming back to you. And at that point, we'll probably then make the point again that we think he's biased. Seems to make sense to wait and see if he actually decides in our favour or not, right?
Yeah. So next one is from David Campson. Do the lawyers like Nick DeMarco get to choose their cases, or they assign them by the firm, Chambers? This is me being really oblivious to this, but what I was reading today is the likes of the Silks and lawyers and things like that aren't actually employed by the Chambers, the self-employed. Is that correct?
So solicitors generally are employed and instructed by Mike Ashley generally. Chambers are self-employed. So they have a cab rank rule, which means that generally cases that come in, you have to take the client unless you have a good political reason not to. In this case, it's slightly different because he's an expert in his field. So Mike Ashley presumably will have specifically chosen him. And once you get to Silk, you can probably choose what you take and what you don't. And so he will have, you know, this is a great case to take. I mean, this is his bag, right? And
profile-wise as well. This is in all the headlines.
Yeah, so I imagine that he potentially could have said no, but yeah, I mean, why would he?
Another one from Andrew Davis here. As Nick DeMarco has said directly to Kieran Maguire that arbitration is something anyone should not do, as it's about getting a deal because more chance of losing.
Who's Kieran Maguire?
I don't know.
Okay. Again, you don't know. Like, obviously, you advise certain circumstances depending on the facts of the case. So, Mike Ashley's solicitor's Denton's, and this Silk will have sat down in a conference room and said, "What do you think our best chances are of success?" It depends on the outcome. If Mike Ashley wants compensation, or if he wants this or he wants that, then in the same way that I do with crime, you would say this is what you should do. These are your best options. And, we just don't know in these specific circumstances. Maybe Nick DeMarco says, in this case, arbitration is the best way to win because of how the Premier League work. They like to do things privately, and this is how we can apply the most pressure. So again, we just don't know.
Is Kieran Maguire not? I'm sure Nick DeMarco appeared on some form of podcast not so long ago. Could it be a case of something to do with that? I'm sure he did. Hang on, there's something in. Kieran Maguire is a football finance expert. I'm sure it's something to do with a podcast. I'm sure it is.
Maybe it's to do with the money then. But yeah, again, I don't know. Can't comment.
So I think that's it in regards to the questions. I think you've summed quite a lot of it up there in regards to what's happened today. Obviously, the club statement. I've only read bits of it, what people are putting in the WhatsApp group, but apparently Mike Ashley just came out at the end of it and said that he's going to fight for this to give Newcastle United fans what they deserve. A little bit rich coming from Mike Ashley to tell us that he's going to give Newcastle fans what they deserve when he's been in control of the club for the last 12 years. I'm not sure why you thought that was a good thing and a good sentence to put on the likes of a statement, but Jesus, do you think the season's going to be finished and we're still going to be looking at this and this is still going to be going on?
Yeah, probably. I think it's just better to leave it going on in the background. I think this document says, I've got a serious legal team and we are really pissed off about this Premier League situation and we're going to fight you till the end. Whether I think that necessarily leads to a takeover or whether it means Mike Ashley's going to say, I'm going to get what I deserve, which means even more money. I think that's still up in the air. But yeah.
We've got to remember he's just pocketed 15 million quid as well, I think it was, which was a non-refundable deposit from the likes of the Saudis. There's a couple more, Shell, before we go. There's one from Daryl. Before we read the question, if people haven't listened to Daryl's podcast with Matthew Riesbeck, I suggest you all do it because it's an absolutely fantastic listen. It's around about an hour and 40 minutes long, and it just goes through what Riesbeck's done in his career as well as growing up as a Newcastle United fan. So that is a great listen. So Daryl says, has Nick DeMarco achieved a victory in defeat by highlighting the history of the arbitration chair and attracted even more scrutiny to the process and the final rulings? I think we did touch on this earlier, and you said it's basically just rustling a little bit, some feathers, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's really clever. I think it's a really smart move. I think it's definitely tactical, and you can't just say, "Oh, we've lost 2-0." We're all talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. The journalists are writing about it. Even more people are going to be watching. The next time something comes out, everybody's going to be looking. We're going to be looking at every word that this chairman says. So yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned before, obviously, the likes of Nick DeMarco highlighting this, it puts even more tension on the likes of the chair of this, that he has to do everything correctly now.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's going to be looking at it. And look, I mean, he's obviously going to be totally impartial. That's his job, of course. But he might now be thinking, bloody hell, if I'm going to make a decision against these guys, I'm going to be getting both barrels. Everybody's had a look at my late night emails that I've been sending. I'm going to have to be really careful. That's
another one here is, hang on. We've already done that one. Where is it? There we go. It is from Metro Marty. It says, a common claim on social media is that Nick DeMarco has never lost a case. Is that likely?
I mean, it depends what you mean by lost a case. I've seen lawyers define them very, very strangely. So with arbitration, it tends to be a settlement. If they settled in the middle, for example, though that's not really the case here, but say, for example, it was compensation and they settled for an amount in the middle, which wasn't the amount his client wanted, would you say that was a win or a loss? I'd be very surprised if he's never lost a case in 20 plus years. But again, it depends what you define a loss by. But he's obviously very, very good. But litigation is completely uncertain. So it's not, he's never lost a case, so he'll win this case. That's not how litigation works. And if you were sad enough to read this judgment, you would see that it's a very, very fine line between one side of the argument and the other, and where the judge comes, and you're never going to know that. So he can't equally be telling his clients, I've never lost a case, so I'm going to win. But people are a bit obsessed with that. So I can see why that comes up. I don't know. Maybe he can come on our podcast and tell us.
Yeah, so if he does ever want to come on the podcast, I'll let you host that one, because me sat next to Nick DeMarco trying to understand anything that he's going to say is completely out of the question. It will not be me doing that.
Let's not do it on a Friday, though.
What about Saturday?
Yeah, maybe like really early Saturday. It's bread in the oven.
So, Shell, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for coming on tonight. There's lots of questions in relation to takeover as PIF. This isn't what this was tonight. We're not going to go down the rabbit hole of trying to separate PIF and Mohammed bin Salman. It's not happening. It's not happening tonight. We all know the background of that one. If you do want to know more on that one, we've done a podcast with Ben Jacobs a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it's really good. It's quite long, but it's really enjoyable to work out what the
podcast isn't too bad either.
Whee!
Yay!
Yeah, it's really good. It's quite long, but it certainly does. It needs to be, because it's very difficult, as you can see from my rambling tonight. It's very difficult to explain things quickly, but that clearly is going to be the subject of arbitration. So yeah, let's see.
Also, we do have plenty more things on the channel at the moment. For members, I can see there's a lot of yous in the chat at the moment, and anybody else who is watching who does want to become a member of the channel, it's as little as $2.99 a month to sign up to become a member. You do get extra content. There's another video just gone out earlier this evening, which is myself, Daryl, and Adam, the man who you never see. The man who's behind the scenes working on the likes of these videos. We have started a career on FIFA Pro Clubs, which is, even if you don't like FIFA, even if you're not a gamer, it's an enjoyable watch just to see how bad we are at this game. So go and watch that one if you are a member. And yesterday we had a podcast which is now known as Besties and Deckers Book Club. Apparently, Bestie made that name up on the spot, where they are joined by Harry de Cosimo to discuss his recent book, Black and White Night, which is Bobby Robson's time at the club and how he made Newcastle United again, which is an absolute fantastic watch. I watched that earlier this afternoon, which is absolutely fantastic. Just looking back over the likes of Bobby Robson's time at the club, the strips, the players, the squads, the results, and everything behind the scenes, it's absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure if you watched that one yet, Chell. It only went on today.
I've been actually quite busy today.
Quite busy because you've got 40 pages of that shite to look through.
Yeah, I was also trying to do my actual job, which definitely obviously came second. So no, I haven't seen it. But yeah, have a lovely weekend, everyone. Thanks for having us. Sorry, it's been a bit of a dry one for Friday night, but Chris was going to do this podcast sober, so at least we've rectified that situation.
Yeah, so this is just for people who would doubt this. I'm not sure why anybody would doubt this. Shell is probably one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Tonight I have my kids with me, so I couldn't leave the house. And Shell said, we can't do this sober. So these little things were delivered by Deliveroo, courtesy of Shell. So thank you very much for supplying me with alcohol tonight.
Absolutely. I mean, most of us lawyers, I'm sure Nick DeMarco would be supportive of doing this with some cans.
I'm just hoping for some tiger bread to turn up, courtesy of Nick DeMarco.
I know. I was thinking I should have just ordered you a pizza as well, but then it was just getting a bit weird, wasn't it? So I did, for people that don't know, I did ask Adam what Chris's address was, and he tried to describe his front door to me, and I was like, I'm not sure, like a delivery 200 miles is...
Yeah. So the lad behind the scene, who makes a lot of these videos come together, he thought it was a wise idea to tell Shell, not my house number, but the colour of my front door, apparently. And apparently that was going to arrive at us through Uber Eats or delivery, wherever it was. Not the case, Adam. I don't know why we're ever trusting you with these sort of videos, to be honest.
He's definitely now going to cut this bit as well for the edit as well.
No, he's not, because you're not here tonight. So I'm in charge. Everybody who is watching. Oh, but guess what? Adam is in the chat. But yeah, thanks very much. As always, we have plenty more stuff coming as a podcast and as a YouTube channel. If you do want to follow Shell on Twitter, then you can do so. What's your at, Shell?
At Red Rose Michelle.
And obviously, if you want to follow the Gallowgateshots Twitter account, it's just at Gallowgateshots. We do have a podcast. In fact, we don't. We'll have a live watch along coming on Sunday with myself and Decker and possibly Mark. So stay tuned for that one, where Newcastle are going to be missing their 3 key players, and we are going to be taking on Sam Allardyce's team. Can't wait for that one.
6-pointer, that one.
Absolutely bring it on. It's going to be the worst game of football I've ever seen in my life. So thanks very much, everybody. Go and enjoy the rest of your Friday night. I'm not sure what's on the telly, but go and have a look. See you later.